Apoxie Sculpt. It's a two-part epoxy resin. You mix the catalyst together with the other portion of it. It hardens, and it makes this hard, crusty material that is very durable and rigid. However, it can also be brittle and difficult to chop through, and doesn't have a lot of flexibility, unlike green stuff, which does. So how do you get the most of both worlds? Well, you just mix them together, right? So there's other ways you can do this. You can also use Milliput instead of Apoxie Sculpt. But the old one that I remember is Milliput and green stuff. So I've used this before. I've heard of somebody about maybe a week or two ago talking about mixing the Apoxie Sculpt with the green stuff, and they had good results. I recounted this to someone recently. You might know him as Andy Mecha. And he was very skeptical about it. So what I told him was that I was going to prove that there is an advantage and or disadvantage, or at the very least, there's a distinct difference when you mix the two materials together. So it's all really for science, not just to prove him wrong. But yeah, I basically just wanted to, I said, look, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and let's do a real world test. A real world test, and see what this stuff can do. So what I'm going to do here, or what I've done, is I've mixed green stuff with Milliput and got a green stuff Milliput hybrid. Then I mixed Apoxie Sculpt with green stuff, or where is it? Apoxie Sculpt with green stuff, and got an Apoxie Sculpt green stuff hybrid. And then this one is kind of like an outlier. This is all three of them mixed together. So this is mostly green stuff, but it's got a Milliput and Apoxie Sculpt mixed in there too. And what we're going to do is we're going to scrape these little bars off, and we're going to put them in this vise, and we're going to wedge them in the vise, and what we're going to do is slowly close the vise and figure out how long it takes, or how tight the vise will get before each piece breaks. But it's for science. So first things first, let's see if we can get this off of here without destroying it. All right, there's one. So this is our green stuff Milliput hybrid. Next up is green stuff. Once I'm done crushing these in the vise, and I'm going to get them to the right size, more or less the same size, so we can kind of get a better idea. But once I'm done crushing them in the vise, I'm also going to do a little bit of sanding and see how each one of these holds up to that. So here we go. Here's our mix. Let's proceed with our experiment. We're going to start with the green stuff, which to me this is going to be the control sample. We'll see how far this gets. So the idea is we're going to place a little bit of this green stuff in here, which is about, let's see, if I were to measure this, these are all roughly 5/8 of an inch. This is a 5/8 of an inch by maybe about a 1/16 of an inch thick. You might call it 1.5 millimeters roughly. And what I want to know is what happens when you start to crush this. My guess is it's not going to break, at least not right away. It's going to probably bend, which I can already see it is. There's I didn't even turn it all the way. Let's see, it may not even make it this far because it's probably just going to pop out. So bending, 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 and then I'm going to measure how much of a distance there is between these two after it finally does break, if it breaks. So there you go, there's green stuff. Green stuff getting crushed, not breaking yet. Not breaking yet. Still not broken. Let's see if we can get a better shot in there. Well, doesn't look like there's a break. and it's pretty much in half now. It's pretty much squashed. So let's take it out. We'll see if it actually broke. So green stuff did not break. Look at this. Oh, it did break. But it didn't break all the way through. So we've got a little bit of let's see if I can pull out. I'll get behind this here. So what happened here? It looks like it has a crack, but it didn't actually separate. So it almost practically bent in half before it cracked. But it did not completely break. So that was just plain green stuff, 100% green stuff with no mix. Okay. So what's up next? Next is we're gonna do the let's do the Apoxie Sculpt. Again, I'm gonna measure this. It is approximately 5/8 of an inch. And I'm just gonna put that in there so it's nice and snug. Let's zoom in and get a look at it. All right, here we go. Let's see if I can focus in on it a little bit better. So, turning, you can see it's already got a little bit of a bend in it. Right? Let me put something behind it so we can see it a little better. Let's turn it some more. It's bending. Bending. All right, I can already see it's forming a crack at the top. Whoa! And there it goes. Broken half. Okay. So let's take our measurement. We're very scientific here, of course, as of course you know. So let's take our measurement. We're going to measure that point to this point. Which is actually pretty much way off. Let me get a pen that's a little bit more fine pointed here. Here we go. All right. All right, so this was Apoxie Sculpt. The breaking point of Apoxie Sculpt was right there. And green stuff, we're going to put green stuff here under the bottom. Green stuff is just a single line because it didn't actually break. All right, let's do the next one. The next one in our grand experiment. I think I've collected the pieces of Apoxie Sculpt. I mean, and it broke right down the middle. So who's next? Let's do Milliput. My guess is it's going to break even faster than the Apoxie Sculpt, but that's just my guess. So there we are. There's the Milliput. Haven't put any tension on it just yet, just enough to hold it. And you can see it bending. Let's get a little bit of light on here. I'll put my glasses on so I can get a better look at it because the yellow is a little hard to see. There it is. No crack yet. It's bending. Bending. There's a break. Did that break it in half? No, it didn't quite break it in half. We'll give it the benefit of the doubt, and we'll keep going. See if it's got a little bit more left in it. Yeah, okay, that broke it. But it did crack a lot sooner than the Apoxie Sculpt, which was kind of what I was guessing was going to happen. Wow, okay. If we're to believe the results, it looks like it cracked at exactly the same point, and when I say cracked, I mean cracked completely in half, at almost exactly the same point as the Apoxie Sculpt. I think it cracked a little earlier, but it didn't crack completely in half, so I have to give that to it. I mean, it's only fair. So that was Milliput. So here's where we're at so far. Milliput, Apoxie Sculpt, and green stuff. Who's up next? Let's do the Apoxie Sculpt green stuff mix. If you saw my previous video, you know these were all mixed in equal amounts, 50-50. So this is the Apoxie Sculpt green stuff mix. It should be a lot more flexible. Let's find out. Let's see if it had any advantage at all. All right, this is the Apoxie Sculpt green stuff mix. So if this gives any advantage to the Apoxie Sculpt, it should be that it's more flexible. All right, let's start. Bending, bending. No breaks yet, no cracks. I'm not seeing any visible cracks. I see a little bit of tension forming on the edges. It is really going. I see a little tiny, like very small cracks starting to form up at the top. You can kind of see these little lines right here on the edges, but it hasn't broken yet. And no, no. Oh, there's a bigger crack right there. It's just about breaking. I think it broke in half at that point. Did it? Yeah. No, actually it didn't. It has not broken completely in half yet. All right, well, once again, we'll give it the benefit of the doubt. We're going to put it back in. We're going to keep pushing it till it cracks completely. No, that didn't do it, but at this point I don't think it's going to crack completely in half. It's pretty much just kind of stuck there. So I think it's safe to say that it still did pretty well. How far did we get with this one? Looked like it was doing pretty good. Oh yeah, it did do a little bit better. Okay. Not a ton, but I mean, these are small pieces, so a little means a lot. So if I were to say how much, I'd say about 1/8 of an inch better with green stuff than without. There's your epoxy plus GS. Oops. There we go. So a little bit better. 1/8 of an inch better. All right, let's check out our Apoxie Sculpt with, or not Apoxie Sculpt, sorry, Milliput with green stuff. Okay. Whew. Wow. Well, I'm impressed. And yeah, there it is. That's as far as it's probably going to go. I didn't even get the piece out. Yeah. All right. Let's set this up. That one did actually a hair better than the other one. Just a 1/16 of an inch more. And we'll measure these here in a minute. And the last one I wanted to try was the one that's just got everything mixed in it completely. So this one's got a weird mix of green stuff, and this is just for fun at this point. Not that any of it ever really wasn't. But this one's got a mix of green stuff, Apoxie Sculpt, and Milliput in completely unequal amounts. It's completely random. Probably has more green stuff than anything else, so it's probably going to bend really well. Oh wow, sure did it. That actually didn't do very good at all. So I'm guessing it had a lot more, you know, the thing about this experiment is we don't know to what degree, well, in that one I guess it's probably safe to say, but we really don't know to what degree the mix went through. So, in other words, did this bar have more green stuff on one side than the other? Was it more centralized? Because it's an amalgam, it's sort of like a Damascus of two putties. We don't know how well they were mixed. I'm of the feeling or thought that they were mixed really well. That last one I can't really say for sure. But I thought I mixed them pretty well. So, what are the results, you ask? Just get to the results. Well, the results are that, and I think this is pretty much unequivocally some proof that without green stuff mixed in, the Apoxie Sculpt and Milliput definitely does not have the flexibility than if you mix it with. And the Milliput and green stuff in particular seem to do the best. So green stuff, obviously, it just basically bent in half before it cracked. Apoxie Sculpt, I think about a 1/2 inch. Milliput, it was actually a little bit more brittle. I was kind of surprised. I thought this, well, no, actually, Milliput, I think, would have been more brittle anyway. So Milliput just slightly more brittle than Apoxie Sculpt. The Apoxie Sculpt was about, I think it survived about 1/8 of an inch more than when it originally, without the green stuff, had it. And the Milliput plus green stuff was by far the best of the mixes. This is roughly barely 3/8 or 5/16. How many is this? How many is this exactly? It is 3/8 exactly. About a little under 1/2 an inch for the epoxy. The Milliput was about almost about a 1/16 over, and the Milliput about the same, or the epoxy about the same, and yeah. So these are just basically a little over 1/2 an inch. This one's about a little under 1/2 inch, and this one's 3/8 of an inch. I think that at least, at the very least, proves that, yeah, it definitely was easier to do. So let's see how well they sand real quick. We'll just throw that in the mix. Here's a nice coarse sandpaper. Yeah, sounds pretty smooth. Takes sanding very easily. Let's take a look at the Apoxie Sculpt. I can tell you already, I already know the Apoxie Sculpt. It does sand really well, but it, to me, when I've used it, it creates a lot more dust. It does sand a little smoother, I think, than the Milliput. But again, we're using Milliput regular, not Milliput fine, so that may affect it. I'd say this is somewhere in between Milliput regular and Milliput fine, as far as how much dust it produces and how smooth it is. And it's a little more rigid. Let's look at the other ones. This one, let me see here. That was the green stuff. I can't remember which one was which here. Yeah, so this was the Milliput and green stuff. So let's see if this actually, I'm going to put an angle on it. We're going to see how well this actually sands. Really well, nice and clean, very sharp. Versus regular green stuff. Let's see how that does. I feel a lot of resistance already. It's kind of gummy. And if you can see for yourself, not quite as sharp. It's a little toothy. It's hard to get it is difficult to get a clean, sharp edge on this compared to this. You see that? So this is regular green stuff. This is green stuff mixed with Milliput. And then we'll try green stuff mixed with Apoxie Sculpt, which I'm going to guess is pretty much on par with what the Milliput is. I'm just going to put another angle in it. Again, a little bit firmer. Pretty good. Not bad. I'd say not. I don't think this one's quite as good as the. Well, it's sort of hard to say. I don't know if that's because it has a little more green stuff in it, and that's in that corner. It seems a little less crisp and sharp than the Milliput. It is better than the green stuff by itself. Let's see that. You know, I think, and you can make your own judge, but that looks better to me than this. And this one, to me, this little angle piece of sanding, I think that looks better. This looks by far better than both of them. So there you have it. It's just much cleaner. That's the end of my experiment, folks. I hope you got some information out of it that was useful. Again, this one was for you, Andy. All of this was for you, sir. For you. So I hope there's no more skepticism in terms of the needfulness or usefulness of mixing these together. Yes, science has been proven the winner today. I think we can all agree. I'll stop yelling now. All right, talk to you folks later. Bye-bye.